Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. The place where we like to go beyond the review to get into the craft, the story, and the meaning of the films we choose to watch. Today, we are going to be looking at Apollo 10 and a half, A Space Age Childhood, the latest from Richard Linklater. The film, well, here's the logline I wrote for it. A grown-up Stanley tells the tale of his growing up as a middle child in the suburbs of Houston, Texas in the summer of 1969 and his secret contribution to the success of the historic Apollo 11 moon landing. As I said, it's from Richard Linklater. He wrote and directed it. It stars Milo Coy as the young Stanley and Jack Black as the older narrator Stanley. It also stars Glen Powell, Zachary, Levi, Josh Wiggins, Lee Eddy, Bill Wise, Natalie Lamoureux, Jessica Brynn Cohen, Sam Chipman, and Danielle Guilbot. The film, getting into the social nutrition checklist, it got a big fat 0. Which, folks, whoops, sorry about that. I'm not totally shocked by this. For those of you who don't know, we decided to, change the film. Last week we had said everyone what we're going to watch Riders of Justice, a revenge flick starring Mads Mikkelsen, former soldier, wife and child killed in a terrorist attack. Of course, gets some buddies together and shoots a bunch of shit up. Needless to say, after what happened this week, it seemed, just didn't want something with a bunch of guns in it. And I reached out to Jim. He agreed, and so we went back and forth and came upon this film. Of course, it's a made in Texas, right to work state, no union, no unionized worker. And I'm like, well, of course it is, because it's the times we live in, and of course looking back at this kindler, gentler time. Anyway, that's what got us here today. I would like to know from anyone who sees this later or is just tuning in now, I think there is a discussion to be had about film and culture and how it may not, and I'm definitely not one of those who thinks the film creates violence. Oh, they watched that movie or they played that video game or that music. Therefore, that said, I do think film, as one of many cultural artifacts, does set a stage for how we react to these things. And it can create a context where things can happen. And so, if we want a deeper conversation about that, I'd love to hear from you folks in the chat or in comments later down below. From there, I think it's time to bring on my co-host with the most, the man, the myth, the legend. Wait a second here, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. And let me make sure I've unmuted him before How you doing, Jim?
Good. End of another weekend. Finally feels summery here, and everything's all good. We get to talk about a little bit of culture.
Yeah. Jim, quickly before we get into the meat of the flick, what did you think about, as you're watching this film, how did you contrast it with what we've been watching, learning about
About
what happened
Uvalde.
about what happened in Texas.
Yeah,
Not
you know,
that
it's
far away from Houston.
It's interesting because we were sort of thinking, okay, maybe we won't do them, as you mentioned just now. Maybe we won't do the violent movie. Let's do something. Let's totally get away from what happened. Oh, let's do a show about growing up in Texas, which is essentially which very close to same state basically, other side of the state from Uvalde, but it not. There are some similarities, but it was far. We were looking for a gentler, I think, gentler movie to watch than what we had initially proposed.
Well, and even just something that just doesn't have a bunch of guns in it. Like,
Yeah,
I got to admit, that was I don't want it.
Yeah.
We do. You know what? Well, again, I'd love to hear from everyone. If I think there is a deeper conversation we can have, and maybe tonight isn't the night. But I don't want to, and you're right, Jim, but what I'm worried about now is it's like, it's not to provide escapism either. This terrible thing happened. And even as us as Canadians are affected by it, as you, Jim, pointed out, you know what? Police failing in their mission happened a few years ago in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why we call it, why it's A stands for all in hashtag HCAB. So I think there is a conversation, and art has that opportunity to, I don't know, provide like just come and escape with us. Don't think about it. Don't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or a spark for action, and or at least contemplation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get into we do have this film, which is a fascinating flick, and we have some wonderful company in the chat already. So let's first say hi to them. Jim, we have first up. Look at that, Richard L, and I'm sure Katie Fowler isn't. Welcome, Richard L.
Hey guys.
And then our favorite Nevadan, tied with tied with another Nevadan, Brian, aka Dragon Movie Guy.
Cody said Brian's from Washington.
Oh, good grief.
He's a Cascadian, or whatever.
And
hi guys.
DMG's making a comment about I have some mix minus. I don't believe I'm doing a mix minus, but I do
Maybe
have an echo.
Yeah, we tried to dispatch with that earlier, but we'll.
Yeah. It is what it is, folks. You'll just have to. Yeah, Restream, I believe, is jerking us around a little. Not the first time.
Uh-oh. And they're cut off.
Oh, it is. It's nothing more frustrating, you guys, than these guys. And I'm sure I'll reach out and they'll be like, "Well, you should clear your cookies. You should do this. You should do that."
No, that's the worst.
Oh well, the internet. It's like, F you. I pay you top dollar. Ow. Enough of my complaining. Let's talk about the movie we're here to talk about. And you know what, Jim? I think we're going to do away with the quick review. Do you want to give me your one-line first impression before we get into the before we move into the spoiler zone?
Yes, I've never seen rotoscoped vomit before. That's now off my checklist.
I got to admit, in a movie that had a lot of actually like a lot of interesting lines. I do love a movie that starts with what they call a fabulist, which is a nicer way of saying persistent liar. And I'm like,
yeah.
Ooh, this will be interesting. All right. Well, with that out of the way, let us jump into the spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone.
And yes, for those of you showing up later, yeah, you've been warned. Jim, what? Yeah, what did we get back into the rotoscoping, the technique?
Sure.
What did you think?
Well, it certainly looks cool. Like even when you put out the thumbnails today, and then I forwarded them. I still thought just that one image of the kid with the space helmet on. I still think yeah, it looks cool. In the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure what purpose it serves, and that's not a crank. Just saying why do it this way. I think there's probably like it's interesting how the news flash and the shots of RFK and the archive film and stuff looked as rotoscoped. Like they even specialized that a little bit. And so I suppose there's a way it's maybe cheaper to do. You don't necessarily have to worry so much about the visuals. You don't have to find actual 1970s furniture. You can just sort of make it. I would think, but it's very cool looking and pretty intriguing. And the other thing too is that facially, it's pretty. The subtleties I think are conveyed through the rotoscoping. Still, you don't lose anything. You don't lose anything in that translation, I don't think. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely about that. It was a cool way, especially that they committed to the bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they rotoscoped. They use the same technique when they're doing stuff that we remember as. Boy, oh boy, just both of us have all kinds of extraneous noise. But they committed to the bit, and we are actually. Sorry, this echo is driving me absolutely up the wall. They committed to the bit. They've committed to the bit, and we're here. They used it on even footage that we know, pictures we know,
Mm-hmm.
From a million other documentaries of the time, of the era. And I kind of enjoyed it. It gave if the film is a lot about memory, it kind of provides maybe not a gauze, but hey, this is a drawing on top of. We're tracing what do you know what I mean? We're tracing even the documentary stuff. There is there's still subtleties there, like you talk about. They are less subtle. It's a little, everything's a little softer. It's not as sharp. It's a little more, well, I shouldn't say it's sharper, but you're losing texture maybe as the lines are more defined. It becomes more comic booky. So yeah. What did you think? I wanted to ask you about the very final song. And did you catch that song, like just over the very start of the credits and everything?
It was a modern song, wasn't it? It was Kathy. It was a woman singing, I believe, unless that was the second one they played over the credits. I had the credits running when I.
Yeah, no, right at the very end. I think it was a band actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a woman's voice singing, I believe, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I'd have to check it out.
I was more thinking about the words, and it's like just like thematically, Anyway, even some of the soundtrack, unless when they were just being documentarily, like kind of, hey, this was the music being played on TV at that time. This is what my sisters were into. It wasn't American Graffiti though.
Yeah.
Like their music choices.
Yeah, and there was, it was the interesting part. There's a conflict at some point, playing Sugar, ad infinitum. But and if you looked at the soundtrack, the list of songs went on for a little bit in the closing credits.
Yeah, it was a big, but not like it wasn't like a. Again, I'm thinking about American Graffiti, and it's just constant and overt. Here, it seemed, I want to say it was all pretty exegetic. Like the kids would play something, or we'd hear it on the television, or.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just looking up. I sort of really dug how it started off. It's whenever that's it, Donovan. Whenever you're exposed to different songs. There was a really oddly named song that they began with in the schoolyard. It's a Donovan song, and it's like one word, a girl's Middle Eastern name or something to that effect. But I thought that, and they kind of kept on hitting that one for the first act, I think, and that was kind of neat. But yeah, they kept, I think, it pretty close to the time. I'm not a musicologist, so I don't know that 100%. I thought I caught American Girl by Tom Petty, but I think that's Tom Petty's version is a remake from an earlier song. So I thought I should probably research these things before I open my mouth about them. But I always appreciate the newer songs, not the ones, they played Herb Alpert, Taste of Honey. I guess you can't avoid that kind of stuff, but a lot of the instrumentals that were big at the time as well. So they didn't play Dave Brubeck, but that was probably even predating that a little bit. But anyhow, I was going to say one more thing about the rotoscoping is that the nice thing that I wrote down and totally forgot to mention, the nice thing, it's nicely aligned with the movie's sense of humor, which is very deadpan. So you didn't have a lot of sort of mugging or anything like that, and so that fit really nicely with when somebody said something and there's like a moment of silence. It's very dry sense of humor that the movie had, so that sort of fit in there well. You didn't have to have like any manic kind of. It wasn't Kramer on Seinfeld, for instance. It was very kind of a subtle, dry sense of humor.
Well, and the whole aesthetic, as colorful it is, and it's got all those earth tones that you'd expect from the era and from the region, let's say. But it also really does the whole tone of the look, like or let's say the look, the audio, the animation style, because there is also some hand-drawn stuff in there apparently. Everything is about setting up a tone that I think fits into the story. Into whole, like I was I read this quote on Linklater, his trademark style of minimal camera movements and lack of narrative. But I think the craft lends itself to that. It's that's not. It really did set the right tone for what we were looking at.
Yeah. His tone of phoning it in. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and you know what? Maybe it's a perfect time to move into the story.
Sure.
I was surprised. Finally, they have a moment, and I want to say it was at the 40-minute mark. And everybody, I really apologize about this echo. I didn't just know. Insert expletive here, control over this. It goes out to the internet, it goes to Jim, and then it comes back to us, because of fucking internet. Pardon my poor language. Oh, wait, Jim. I am going to ask you. Sorry, folks, we're just going to try technically one more thing.
Sure.
On the little device, near, like on, you'll see a little switch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it'll be on one side. It should be on the one side headphone. Is it?
Here, I can switch it.
Okay, now switch back.
Okay, switch back.
Okay. No, it's still doing that. Huh. Well, it was a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Okay.
Live TV.
Pardon?
Live TV, folks.
Live television, yes. In the 21st century, you can put a man on the moon, or perhaps a child. You can't get rid of this stupid echo. Thanks for nothing, Restream. I look forward to my non-refund of my $50. You fucking jerks. Okay, going back to the story, Jim. we I was surprised. 40 minutes in, there's a moment where, oh, right, yeah, let's go back to, because of course it starts with this kid introducing himself, youngest of 6 children in a, children of a housewife and a NASA bureaucrat, doing their middle class American thing. And we learn that he's a bit of a bullshitter because he's kind of embarrassed about his dad. And then it hooks into, he concocts the story for himself about how he's been recruited because they've made the NASA module a little too small and they got to do a test run. And so he's been recruited to do a whole fake moon landing, or a moon landing while he's at summer camp. And
in Michigan.
Yes. Where you had all the tropes. The bugs were bad, but there was a girl, and all the stuff. And then it stops, goes back into what it was doing, and then 40 minutes later, oh right, anyway, I was telling you that story about how I had a secret mission to the moon as a child, as an 8, 9, 10-year-old. And it kind of took me out of it. It's like, oh, that's right, we are watching a movie here. Where is this thing going? But it kept me engaged. Although, back to this quote, lack of narrative. There's a beginning and there's kind of a middle and there's kind of an end. I can't, though, say it's there's a classic, this character has this need and this internal need and that external want. You couldn't use the hero's journey on this. Why do you think, at least for me, it kept me, I enjoyed it. I was still watching at the end of it.
Yeah.
And not frustrated.
Yeah.
Weirded out a little maybe, but not, what the...
Yeah, I think I looked, it was either 46 or 52 minutes, and at the 52-minute mark, because I was sort of thinking that. I thought, well, this reverie, this nostalgia, it's fine, going on a bit long. Let's and I think I've been thinking about it all day, actually, as I tend to do after I watch them on Saturday nights, and even the trailer, I think, sells the hook for the story a bit more than the hook is present. It's built around this notion that the kid was recruited. Just, a couple of agents saw him playing kickball, and he said, he's their guy, which sort of automatically sets up the unreliable narrator, trick. But so then it sort of goes into his growing up in Houston, and all that entailed, growing up in a large family, all the cultural things that he experienced, from the monkeys to the a lot of it through the prism of his older brothers and sisters, and so there's a lot of material. It struck, what this felt like? It felt like, and I don't know how autobiographical this is about Linklater himself, maybe a little bit, but it felt like I was reading a biography. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
One that had quite a long setup. And this is a movie, I think, maybe except for the rotoscoping, that my mom would have really liked, because she was sort of into that. And it's sort of, it's a little bit earlier than when you and I grew up, but there was a lot of familiar kind of things that we were, the TV shows and the a lot of the cultural stuff of the time.
There was a few beats, especially I'm thinking I should have mentioned it earlier, but the Moonrise poster. Going through grade school in the 70s, what teacher didn't have that? What classroom didn't have that poster? And we're all in one world. And I tell you now, at least in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, none.
Yeah, yeah.
They might have graduated. Here we now issue a lifetime supply of Moonrise pictures, or Earthrise, I guess it'd be.
There's
whatever.
even been documentaries on Earthrise
Yeah.
that I've seen lately, so sort of a new appreciation of it, and its importance. But it did. I mean, lack of narrative. Definitely, that sort of fits in with his sort of his very casual way of getting to the end of the story, and
even at the end, you go, well, that was a good story. What was the point of the story? Like, without getting into the themes, even.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you telling me?
A little bit slice of lifey, I think, if you.
I think it's totally slice of life.
Yeah.
Like, in a way, that's all we're getting is little anecdotes of his summer.
Yeah.
I know I called it in the logline a coming of age. I don't even think it's that. I think it's just the slice of life of a kid who still hasn't, grown. You know what? I putting air quotes on it's too harsh. He's probably got another year or maybe even 2 of idyllic summers.
Yeah. No, and it did convey that quite a bit too. Just the carefree aspect of it, and I think maybe was that part of the point of it is riding in the back of a pickup truck for an hour without sunscreen or hats in Texas in the summer. Like, does his family all have skin cancer now? That's one of the things that was going through my head. But just and nobody ever complained about the heat. I know if it was, I mean, there was a gentleness to this that I think maybe was reflective of his character's age.
I even wrote anodyne. Like,
yes,
there was a word that came up, but it might be too pejorative. Something you mentioned, and I did think of that. It's almost like everything's here to subvert our expectations. I thought myself early on, the unreliable narrator, except that he pops that bubble right away. I was a persistent liar. So you're already kind of, okay, so we are not being drawn into a little boy's fantasy. It's, and I want to say he even, and this is later on, he says what people don't talk about, what has been forgotten about, or I can't quite remember the language the narration was, but it was how it was not a popular program. The space program was not popular. The public, many people, for many different reasons, like right, center, left, thought it was a big waste of money. And yes, they were proud at the time, but there was a reason why it died an ignominious death, was because the public, even before, was like, well, why are we spending this money? Why are we? That's a lot of money. Don't we have a war on? Don't we have this? Why should I pay any taxes? Like, and that so it's almost like whether it be a big moment of, anyway, this fantasy, I'm just a liar. I was a liar as a kid. But later on, saying, people don't remember, like he's actually bringing up a historical, like kind of correcting our memory about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because
No, I was going to say there's an interesting sort of cross reference here from, I don't know why I did the cross sign, but anyway, there's an interesting cross reference with a recently released movie on Apple TV. It's Questlove Summer of Soul. And they do, because that happened in the summer of '69 as well. And they do talk about the moon landing, because I think it happened. Did it happen on a Saturday or on the weekend?
July.
In July. And people at the festival were talking about it. And there was, and I think maybe one of the interviews when they were talking to an African-American man, several African-American men about this. And I think that same interview is referenced in Summer of Soul, which is a decent little movie as well. So
here, let's see. I think I can actually find. I looked it up. I looked it up.
But, you know, it was of the time because Summer of Soul was a series of weekend concerts. They not just one event, but over the summer of that summer anyway. But
the mission was July 16th through the 24th.
Okay, yeah. So it would have encompassed a whole weekend, then some. So
a week and change.
Another interesting cultural thing that they included in the story was, is in amongst the randomness of some of the references, is that when they opened the Astrodome in Houston, which was the Space Age stadium, which I believe is already closed, but instead of, when they were sort of putting the shovels in the dirt, is that the politicians took their guns out and shot at the ground. And I just, with the news this week about, the shooting and stuff, I just thought, oh boy, this is even back then. And another interesting connection is with another rotoscope movie is the amazing movie Tower, which is about the one of the first shootings,
one of the earliest school shootings.
At the University of
I want to say it was Texas.
Austin, I think.
Yeah,
I think it was in Austin. Anyway, that's also rotoscoped, and that's an excellent movie. But yeah. So there's a lot of little sort of. It's funny that all these years ago these things happen, and 50 years onward, people are still making movies about it. So.
Yeah, it was at the University of Texas at Austin.
Yes, yeah. So, that was about the only, that was when I immediately wrote a note. I was like, yikes. That's an interesting Texas take on that. You just,
But, and going back to what I was saying before we even got into this movie in particular, that idea of, not that it causes it, but how a film, let's say specifically, reflects the culture. And because of editing, because of the distance of time, the way memory edits, that how much of that is, we're, in a way, it's, now we're getting into the meaning here, but what we choose to remember, how we remember it. But yeah, how much does culture and its artifacts create a context under which you can have insanity, and horror. What did you think about, like, again, I want to come back to this. It's at least in the story, it seems to be constantly undermining expectations, but still keeping you engaged. He has no great love. There's no
good point. Yeah.
It's a almost I thought Jack Black did a great job narrating. I should have mentioned that earlier. Very much in the style that Richard Dreyfuss did in Stand By Me.
Yes, yeah.
I'm thinking, The Wonder Years.
Yes, Danielle Stern.
Yes.
Yes.
And all very effective. Again, though, not going, and this is when I learned. Like, the kid learns no lessons, and not in a bad way, not in a just there's almost like no editorializing, or in the most gentle of ways, the physical violence that these kids, how kids just went from one beating to another, even to the degree, the reciprocal parental beatings. It's like, we all have the right to beat each other's children,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Some stuff I was already starting to fall out of favor.
Yeah.
But there's it at every point where you could really take it somewhere, and then it stops, and then we're in another anecdote. another little moment. And the only thing that ties it together, the only narrative drive is, well, sooner or later there will be the Apollo moon landing.
That's the binding agent, yeah.
Yeah, which the little bugger never sees, which is why I think it's still relevant to the story. That's why he concocted this. He went beyond, as his mother says at the end, well, how memory is. By the time, years later, he'll be convinced he was there with us. And then it's like, he went a step further. It's like, nope, I was there.
Yeah. And when she says something about fills in the blanks, or
the way he'll remember it is that he was there with us. That's the way he'll remember it. And then
but at the same time, there's something sweet too about the sort of the put upon dad. He's constantly hauling, putting him over his shoulder to take him to bed, and that's how, in a way, is it the parents' memory, that they're surrounded by family while they watch this, and poor dad working in shipping and receiving at NASA, not actually putting the uniforms together or some of the cool jobs the other parents had.
I don't think he was presented that way.
No.
I didn't. No, and I don't even. It wasn't. I don't think he was saying that as, oh, the other parents had cooler jobs. He was just saying, well, actually, we're all every kid, except at one point where was it the brief moment of, in a story way acknowledging racism, systemic racism. With the daughter. Well, and I've got a bone to pick with that. I'll get into the meeting because I think there's wicked subtext there. But it was a nice story moment of how many kids are in your class, how many black kids are in your class. One, exactly.
Yeah,
of course it is. But that, like you got the oldest daughter, who we've seen in other films is the radical.
Yes,
and they hint at it, but never play it out ever. Mm-hmm. Even when she says, "What did you say? Sorry, what did you say?" The dad, and she's nothing. And that's it.
Stupid mood.
Like she just never like it. But at the same time, I don't feel like when am I going to get to the fireworks factory? Mm-hmm. I've been totally, by the end of this story, kind of going, well, the end will be when they land on the moon. And we'll see the end of his moon adventure.
Yeah. I mean, here's a question that I've sort of been working with. It appears that there's no, and you've been talking about it too, there's not a traditional, all stories are based on conflict. There's not a traditional conflict here at all. Like, I don't think there's not an antagonist. There's not, if you think about it, there's very few movies without death and or violence. If you even think, the other day I was thinking, oh, what about To Kill a Mockingbird? Well, no, there's a lot, no, on screen, not off screen.
Yeah.
The court case and stuff. Well, Gregory Peck shoots a dog, and there's a conflict at the end on Halloween, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, but so that's kind of hard to do, and I wonder if that's sort of one of his goals with this movie is to have something, without. I mean, they refer to RFK. They refer to Vietnam.
The grandmother's conspiracy theories and mother, you're scaring the kids and driving me nuts.
Shut up. But other than that, there's just the passage of time, cultural forces. I don't know. They have a little segment about hippies that's kind of funny, and but there's not really a traditional protagonist or conflict in this, I think, at all.
Well, I think there is a protagonist. It is the boy.
Unless it's something grander or something so subtle that I missed it.
But I think the antagonist, and this is where I think that it's forever subverting our expectations of what it should be bigger. And I think the antagonist is always just in their day-to-day BS. Mm-hmm. He is the youngest. So he's the one when he's changes the channel, and then his bigger sisters said, no, we're doing this, and we're just going to sit on you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Literally.
Literally sit on him.
Yeah.
It's the with the teachers, even the older Stanley, as he looks back and goes, wow, that was crazy. We were put at risk constantly. Going to Galveston, and then the tar, Texas, always a leader in environmental protection. But I think there is conflict there. It's just subtle, and it's not what we're trained to expect. Like, he never gives us that. Never, like, there's no young crush. There's no, his siblings are a little more realistic to families. There's no, and the oldest, he was always a bastard, but this one really took care of us. It was sometimes they're allies, sometimes they're the enemy. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish. What the hell is that?
Is that, I think it was a car squealing out near me.
All right. So I think there is conflict. It's just like everything else. It's just never what we've been trained to expect out of a. That's why I called it a coming of age movie, but it isn't. He is only a little bit older. He is no wiser. He's just
a kid.
Just a kid getting through this. And the big highlight, maybe the reason he remembers it so well, is that it was that summer of 1969 when there was a moonshot, and his dad had a small part to play in shipping receiving.
Yeah,
which was also another great moment where it's like, well, this is the way the Saturn V rocket comes, and it's like, you're involved in that? Well, I don't know if the shipping and receiving, that ain't shipping and receiving. I don't know what is. But Kyle in Florida.
Kyle.
Florida had most of the details. And maybe, actually, okay, I think it is time. You know what? Let's put a pin on that. We do have some comments in the chat I wouldn't mind looking at, but I think we got to come back to if that ain't shipping and receiving, because I think I finally cracked this movie as much as one can crack it.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So first, we've got from Richard L. Or from DMG. It was cool hearing Brynn and Kenny Loggins in the highway to the rotoscope zone. Shot in the dark, Top Gun Maverick. Love Richard Linklater. Boyhood was the most unique movie production he thought he'd ever seen. What is one of your favorite Richard Linklater movies, Jim?
Yeah, I was thinking of that earlier today. Did he do? Sorry, let me just check that. How about you? Why don't you answer that first, and I'll get back to you. I just want to make sure that I'm not putting my foot in my mouth. Here, one sec. I just want to make sure. Because he's done a lot of them. You know what? Boyhood was actually. I have to say. Well, he did School of Rock too, but he was more of a hired gun on School of Rock. Boyhood, I thought, was really ambitious and kind of cool. Just the way that I mean, the commitment, the foresight. That shows somebody that's really, into what he does. Like, if you're willing to commit, you have a few guys. Yeah. You have like Ethan Hawke on your side, and that kind of thing. I think in years when in the coming years, when film students discover how that movie was made, they're going to be like, what the hell? And I think that was quite an achievement, not just for the stunty thing, but it actually achieved, some dramatic heft and yeah, I just thought it was a really neat and unique project. How about you?
For myself, some big Richard Linklater fan. I've only seen of his films. Like I've not seen the Sunrise trilogy. They're what do they call it? The before, during, after, or the before trilogy. That's what they're calling it. That's what they are calling it.
Those kids.
I Dazed and Confused, and I really enjoyed it, and it makes me want to watch it again. That was another, like, it was his American Graffiti in a way, and another movie that didn't really have a point, but there was an idea of change. Whereas this, it's no, this is like in a weird way, it's like, how can I keep people entertained while giving them even less of a story than I have before in my life? And it is successful. Like, I mean, if you think of Christopher Nolan, who's like forever, it's like, how much can I get away with? I don't feel that here. I think he still wants to entertain us, but oh well. Anything else you want to add to that before we move into meaning, Jim? We are
no. I think we're getting to the end of our our own narrative, our own questionable narrative.
Coming back to what did I say before? As I was saying, oh wait, I think I figured something out here with this film.
Shipping and receiving.
He does, and it's at least one of the themes going on here, and maybe it's even in the way he chose to highlight really the mundanity of being young. Not big highlights. Hey, we collected garbage, and this is how we gamed the system for snow cones, and these really mundane little moments. Is it because he says at the end of the film, one of the title cards, it's like, listen, hundreds of thousands of people were involved in the moonshot. Hundreds of millions of people saw this. You could almost say, whether he intended it or not, I think you could kind of look at this as a metaphor for anything really big. Our lives are actually really big. They're filled with a million little moments that really have no meaning in the moment. We love to think of it, that was the watershed. And I like thinking that way. But most of our lives are shaped in the day-to-day grind that somehow ends up, and it's really hard to pull out one moment or another. Like, even the narrator says, health and safety just wasn't a thing then.
As they bicycle behind the DDT truck.
The corporal punishment. Everywhere. But I'm wondering if, that's part of what he's getting at here. And you could maybe make an argument that ascribes to all of his films, and probably somebody has made this argument. But that at least part of the meaning of this film is, it's like, just as the moonshot wasn't a narrative of an entrepreneur, an Elon Musk, and some peons who loved being exploited by him, that it was a big effort, a big multi-year, hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of other stuff going on. You know what? You got the shipping and receiving guy, and then Kyle looked after the details, but I think that maybe is if there's a message, a subtext here, I think that's got to be part of it. It is something I would like to ask Richard Linklater. I'd love to say, what were you getting at here? Or is this part of what you're getting at? Who knows? It could be like what's the Pony Smasher guy? The guy who directs the Shazam movies right now. He did a great video recently where he's like, sometimes we're just solving a thing on set. and it had no meaning.
Yeah.
But when I'm asked about it, I'll go, yeah, I totally planned that.
Yeah.
Although what problems are you having on set in your animated movie? None.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. What do you think? Like, I mean, like, I think that's one of the things going on here. What do you think?
Yeah, I there were several. I don't know that I took a single stream when I sort of jokingly wrote out in all caps, "Television binds us all," because at what point they're talking
Oh,
about
it's a good one.
The Vietnam War, and it's saying that we watched it all through the television, but we were insulated from it, even though it involved our country, and families from Texas, uh, that we were able to view it while sort of being protected from it. So there's I mean, they play outside a lot. They get involved in their childhood japes, and they occasionally suffer a compound fracture when they're playing Red Rover, etc. But I guess when they come in for the night, there's a lot of watching of, and it's not a criticism. There's a lot of watching of television in this movie, and how that kind of binds them and instructs them, and how it differentiates the different members of the family. One person wants to watch this, another person wants to watch that. So I think you can make
and you run a risk of getting sat on if you're you're not in tune with
and smaller and stuff like that. But
yes,
I think
and the youngest.
I think it there's a case to be made for not, I don't think explicitly, I don't think this is what Linklater was going through, but I think a media student in the future will look at this and be able to pull a couple paper or two out of it, talking about how it affected the family in this case. I think speaking of family, I think there's commentary on family here, as you were saying before. There's not one sort of bad guy. There's not one sort of good sibling. They're all just they're just like, all kind, in such a large family, 6 kids, they're quite, I felt they were rather different. I mean, they looked different.
Absolutely.
I thought it was conveyed that they all had their own. I sort of got the middle brother and the older brother confused a couple times, Greg and Stephen, perhaps. Yeah. But and that's interesting. And I think the relationship with the parents was interesting as well. And that again wasn't typical. It wasn't like, oh, my father died 2 years later. There's nothing like that. It was just they're there. We all grew up in the same house, all 8 of us, and we had good times and bad times, and a lot of medium times, a lot of watching of television. But I think there's several things,
but not just television. Like, I mean, spent all like. There's also the board games, as they said.
Yes.
It's the, and then Culture. We went inside, and then there was these games we were playing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I remember that one. Wow.
And then they have the whole screen.
That long.
Yeah.
What did you?
And food, like the foodies, if you watch any of these food shows, they're always talking about how, Bourdain always talked about cook food binding a family or binding people and that kind of thing. So,
but at the same time, again, subtle, never. It never hammers home a point. It's like the reverse of that. It's the gentlest of things. DMG says in the chat, he says, my favorite quote from this movie was, "Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." and apparently he loves the Echo. I do not.
I'm not hearing any of it, but I'm not looking at YouTube either. So
no, it's yeah. Anyway, we'll talk more later. Where was I going with this? What did you think of, like, one of the things that bugged me about this film? And that comes right from when I was building the social nutrition checklist.
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of me that's a little pissed at Mr. Linklater. He briefly acknowledges, oh yeah, there's this thing called racism. There's this, but at no time does he ever otherwise. It's the briefest of comments, and in a way, like I got to admit, there's a part of me. It deserved more than that one comment. It deserved the older Stanley. One of those things where I'm like, I kind of get, yeah, it was that kid, the main Stanley was raised in a very white monoculture.
Yes.
And even looking back at it as a positive upbringing, sure. But Jesus Christ, he can talk about the lack of safety, but not, yeah, it was hella racist or something. Just this one brief moment. Maybe one more moment would have been nice. And I think that's where, and it's a tough one though, like, cause it is I think it is autobiographical. The guy was born and raised middle class in Texas. He's a few years older than I am. He's 61 now. To not, like, I mean, it's like, buddy, where's your head at? Do you pay attention to Texas? Well, you made a non-union film, even though you're a successful filmmaker, so maybe you're totally comfortable with the context. Because that's the other thing, I think. Always the risk with these almost hyper-nostalgic films is you run the risk of it interpreting, the good old days.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's it's a risk, right? And then the word anodyne, it's like, no. There was a better, gentler time. Even at the very end, he does make a clear statement about, we've never been back to the moon yet. That idea that's like, we've got to go back. It's like, why? What's the compelling reason?
Yeah.
There's nothing up there. There is no resort. There's, that's strictly national prestige stuff.
Well, just in terms of, a better time, again, the word again is part of MAGA, right? I mean, it's that's all based on nostalgia.
It's a great,
and it wasn't until I read
an inaccurate and incomplete memory.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry,
I was reading the writer Richard Ford, and he said this character was dreamy, but he used it in a negative way, and I think that sort of led me to nostalgia, and seeing nostalgia not just as this twee little characteristic of certain people that like to look back, but as actually something that can be kind of poisonous. And I'm not suggesting it from here, this movie, but it can be a kind of a poisonous, slow moving but very strong poison. I know people who've passed on that were super triggered by anything nostalgia, to the point to where they couldn't live in the current day. Not couldn't, but it's just like, if they could have gone back, they would have. And that's not necessarily a great quality or something to strive for, but no, I think there's two African Americans that are interviewed on one of those newsreel footages.
Yeah.
There's a kid who helps, black kid who helps Stanley into a ride at the amusement park. And there might be one other.
There was one in the class. They did a report. Yeah.
Yeah. One service, minimum wage service personnel, and two people on the news.
And interestingly enough, for not one Mexican, let's say, Hispanic, it's like
Texas.
Yeah, it's fucking Texas.
And they even go to Ed White School. It reminds me of Liz Lemon in 30 Rock, comes from Whitehaven, New York. But maybe, that's sort of what maybe it was a monoculture, but there might have been a better way to sort of you want to introduce that, but with his tendencies, maybe that would have been too much.
Like I said, yeah, it's
too
and,
unsubtle.
yeah, and of course I'm also looking. This is always a bummer for a filmmaker, is they don't know what's going to happen when their film's released or 6 weeks after it's released. What do you mean one of my fellow statesmen shot the shit out of a school?
Oh yeah,
and so because we cannot help but interpret these things in the while we're seated in the context we're in, so yeah, I want to come back to that idea of nostalgia, because that was certainly one of the other words I thought of. But I recently read at least a 17th century or as 18th century, 1700s definition of nostalgia was an acute homesickness. And it was actually considered I'm not didn't look at mental health the same way, but it was this person is suffering from this. And I think what you're talking about, the elderly, so elderly people, about that, how that hyper nostalgia. Yeah, MAGA, you're absolutely right. This hankering for a past that didn't exist, or maybe in this one, it's you're only seeing a small piece of that elephant. That said, it is also a commentary on memory itself. And so some of it, again, it just keeps subverting. There is some brilliance here, I think. But there is that, I think that part of the meaning of the film is a commentary on memory and how we construct it. The mother literally says it,
Yeah.
When she's not smoking and going, yeah, that's a hippie.
Hippie. Oh yeah. It's very subtly. Yeah.
But yeah, there's that. Memory. How we remember, how we. Yeah, like he will have convinced himself. Which I. Probably not something people were talking about a lot in the late 60s, but it's certainly been well established now by a lot of repeated psychological research. Memories are more constructed, and we're forever editing, pruning, adjusting as we bring up the memory. And even I do. There's the narrator calling a lot of people I can't remember how he put it. It was a great way though. Can't remember quite the line, or the narrator saying, it's been not forgotten but not remembered, something. That there's almost like a conscious choice. A lot of people didn't like the money being spent on the space program. What people don't remember, something to that effect. And so even Linklater is demonstrating more understanding than maybe I was giving him credit for not 5 minutes ago. So it's a tough one. Notwithstanding the 0% the social nutrition checklist, Jesus, Linklater, you couldn't hire a union. These guys are so cheap, and they're now organizing just to get the basics. You couldn't have done that, man.
Yeah, and from Austin too, which I don't think is exactly the height of red power down there. So it's a bit of a blue city, isn't it?
Well, now there actually, and if I remember, folks, I'll put a link to it. He did a great piece. He isn't actually from Austin. It is where he went to school for filmmaking. He grew up different towns, born in Houston, I believe, but ended up, his mother was an instructor at, I want to say, the Sam Brown University. Don't know what for. But anyway, he ended up in Austin. It's where he started the Austin Film Society with a prof that he was taking filmmaking classes from. But he wrote a piece. He's saying, I think it was Slackers, his second film. That's the Austin I remember. It wasn't this keep it weird, kind of weird, like red enclave. It was a kind of shitty Texas town, like a bunch of other shitty Texas towns. He definitely has a totally different, like his experience of Austin is different from what people know about Austin. This is, years before, like his defining ideas of Austin as he matured as a filmmaker are just not South by Southwest Austin, the hipster Austin. Yeah. So I think I will, folks. I'll put that
mustache.
in a thing. And yes, exactly.
Handlebar mustache with
no Alamo Draft House at the time.
Yes,
like it's he was before that. Before Austin got cool, man.
Yeah.
Which is another thing about, maybe that's where he's coming from here, is how do we remember things? Oh, well. Have another comment in the chat, Jim.
Sure.
Keep in mind, Richard Linklater's filmmaking has lots of autobiographical aspects, including growing up in Texas. Absolutely. For example, Dazed and Confused took place at Robert E. Lee High School. Classic moment. I agree with you completely, DMG. Like there is, like again, I still don't think that stops him fucking making a union crew, or they just totally eradicated all trade unionists when they're not shooting children. But you know what? It is that's a tough one, because you also don't want to deny the filmmaker, and this is the same argument. Katie and I had when we were talking about Ghostland. No, Nomad. Nomadland.
The French one?
No, Nomad.
Oh, yeah. I'll look it up.
My ass. This one picks my ass less, but we're still on the same kind of tension of, what do we get to tell the artist to do? At the same time, there's a part of me as well, I don't get to tell what the artist to do, but I get to bitch about what they did. I'll wait until you do something, then I'll praise or pan it as my own worldview sees fit. Jim, I don't think we're quite at that point, but I do think it is time to beg everyone for a like if they haven't already hit that. Of course, please subscribe if you haven't already. And last but certainly not least, ringy-ding that bell. Jim, do we want to take, is this the time maybe to talk about our next movie?
Yeah, sure. Next week, we will be, what is it, June already? Yeah, June next week, we'll be looking at an oddly titled Indian movie called RRR. That's been all over Netflix. I got emails about it from Netflix. The trailer's all over the place. Patton Oswalt was signal boosting this last week. It looks pretty insane. Much like Bahubali.
It does. Yeah, it looks kind of that over-the-top intensity. And so we're going to visit India and India's film industry another time, and RRR on Netflix. So we'll be back here Sunday night at 9:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time, Universal Coordinated Time -5. That's where we're at right now. All right.
Sounds good.
Jim, what are we? How are we looking at this? Are we giving Mr. Linklater a pass or a fail?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like one of his sort of more prominent. I don't think when all is said and done, it won't be seen as one of his more prominent projects. But it's a gentle pass. Maybe we'll say. What would I give him? I'll give him a. Does C sound bad? Yeah, I'll give him a C.
I'm giving him a pass.
I don't like the non-union made aspect. I have to admit, but maybe points.
It's that's bugging me more, you know. Well, and maybe it's just that it's like what nothing on our metric.
Yeah.
For Christ's
Yeah.
sakes.
Yeah.
Not
Has that happened
one?
before?
Like,
yeah,
we've had a couple other zeros.
we have. Yeah. Yeah.
But nothing, including like, I mean, most is at least Union Made or the Bechdel test. They couldn't do either. Like, I mean,
Jackass 5 gets 100.
Although,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, it always the problem with metrics, right? Like they're imperfect tools. Because at the same time, let's say, does it formally pass the Bechdel test? No, it fails that test. At the same time, all the women characters felt full and real, and there were a number of them. And I didn't feel they were. I like that there was two kinds of grandma, and I like. Mother, you're scaring the children and driving me nuts. This is a great line. Like,
and that's why Kennedy's still alive. Yeah.
So that explains Jackie, because Onassis is the one who's holding him in a vegetative state.
Even back then.
So yeah, that's I give it a pass, but a pass with an asterisk, because at the same time, if there's something genius going on here. I would actually say, Jim, I think this film is I think this might be a slow burn. This might be something 5-10 years from now, when they're doing they're going to go, let's take this deserved more credit. Because again, like what I can't remember a movie, at least in my recent past, like DMG is referring to, and I felt the same way about Dazed and Confused. It's like, what is the point of this film? But how regularly he does not meet your typical expectations of something like this, while at the same time I enjoyed it, notwithstanding the moments where I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes, pardon my poor language. So yeah, I've given it a weird kind of pass. It's like it's both a D and an A. Take for that what you will.
Yeah.
Let's get out of that and
sure.
Final thoughts, my friend.
Final thoughts. I want to try tuna casserole with potato chips in it. I've been thinking about that since. I'm like, what kind of texture must that be?
What about the other one? What was it? A Doritos hot pack, where they threw chili into a bag of chips, chili
Frito
cheese
pie.
Frito
pie. They just cut the.
Yeah.
It's like taco in a bag, basically, but you just cut the chips, put chili in, and then some melted cheese.
Yeah, or cheese to shredded cheese.
It sounds like a horrific space meal that you'd eat in space.
I need to try that.
But it's actually, I've had it a few times.
Oh, really?
And, I can't remember what the situation is. Some game, gonna watch game with friends or some work thing, and it was actually pretty good. Oh, it was work. Yeah, it was. Before COVID, when we used to have workplaces, and I think we did. I think we did taco in a bag, and as horrible as that sounds, and as weird as the presentation is, it was pretty good.
Well, that's I got to try this. This is what I'm saying. I got to give that a shot. That just sounds so weird. And so I think, let me quickly take a look at my notes. There were like even at moments it flirts with, almost, you could almost, it's like, oh, he isn't going to a right-wing kind of, they've said we were under threat before and it never played out. He actually goes, well, actually we did it. Nixon signed the Clean Air Act, right? But even the moment, like, there's just these little bizarrely entertaining and almost weirdly sweetheart moments where the dad talks about, here's the difference between a redneck and white trash.
Yeah.
as he drinks down the highway. As long as you're not
Yes.
drunk, you legally can do that.
My God. And you're wearing your seatbelt.
And then the best part is when he's, so does that mean we're rednecks? No. Because you're going to clean that up when we get home.
Oh, dads.
It was a great, but it was just, they have some weird little bizarre, even the, well, how could you make that mistake? Are you good at math? You get 100% on everything? Well then.
Yeah.
Just these great little moments, little written moments.
And even that Stan is not the target of all the the sibling teasing, is that when he goes to the ice cream the older brother, they go to the ice cream shop because she gets 2 scoops free a day for working there.
That she's sick
of all the 31 flavors, he only ever gets vanilla. Yeah. And she bugs him. He goes,
gives him the gears on it.
Vanilla. And that was kind of a neat scene. She's a little bit spiky in that scene, and nice little scenes like that. And even some of the cultural things that I didn't realize. I have to find that clip of Joni Mitchell and Johnny Cash doing that duet.
Yes.
That was I was like, oh my God, So a lot of neat finds in there anyway. But
weird little movie.
That's a good way to put it. Weird little movie.
All right. Well, before we go, first of all, I want to remind everyone, our next movie is RRR. You can find it on Netflix. Indian film. Looks exciting. 9:45 next Sunday, 9:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time, coordinated Universal Time -5. Check it out and then come join us here. Share your opinion on it. And then I guess time to say goodbye to the folks in the chat. First of all, to Richard L. Thank you, Richard L. And I'm sure Katie Fowler's somewhere there in the background. Thank you both for coming by. And then our good friend, Dragon Movie Guy, who will be back on the show. I was going to send him an email tonight about coming back and joining us for a flick. But you know what? There, an email will be following DMG. But Dragon Movie Guy, our good friend, thanks so much for coming and making your notes on Mr. Linklater's oeuvre, his filmography.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's about it, eh, Jim? Are we
wraps it up? Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess it really just, this is what we do now. We start to wave. Goodbye, everybody.
Good night, Mr. Leo.